Heather Vickery.
Hello, Stevie Mans. How are
Hi,
you?
friend. I'm well, thank you.
It's been so long since I've seen you.
It has, and this is a special live. Shut up. This is
It has only been like 3 days, so
2 days.
it's okay.
This is a special live edition of This Next Song's About. This season isn't even started yet. I think the season's kicking off in December. So this is a pre-record. So if you are watching just now, you are getting a special pre-recorded live episode with my esteemed guest today, Heather Vickery, author, coach, podcaster, podcast. Anything else? Entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Do you want to add a fifth? Are we good? Are we good with just being an all-round,
Lesbian mother, single mother of 4? I don't know. Let's go.
Okay, well, Heather Vickery, you are a coach and entrepreneur. You leverage your entrepreneurial skills and expertise to coach individuals towards greater personal and professional fulfillment by helping them leverage their fear into intentional bravery. You are the author of no fewer than 3 books, you fancy pants. Gratitude Journal, Shift Your Focus, Grow Grateful, a Gratitude Journal. There's lots of words in this. Grow Grateful, a Gratitude Journal for kids and families. And your new book, coming out very soon, Fuck Fearless, Making the Brave Leap. You are also the host of the Brave Files podcast and the co-host of Was It Chance podcast coming out in November.
Which it doesn't exist yet, but
it doesn't exist yet.
It will in November.
Yeah, you're the host of 2 podcasts, 3 books, however many businesses, mother of 4. How do you find time to do it all?
I don't know. They always say if you want to get something done, you ask somebody busy, and I believe you and I spoke about this, and we were together at the She Podcast conference last week. Call it privilege. And it probably is, but I don't do things I don't want to do. I just don't. And so all of these things feel right for me. And I say no to a lot of things.
Yeah. And we were fortunate enough to meet at the She Podcast conference in Arizona last week. And we became fast besties, I have to say. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, Like I think even before we actually got there was it's pretty great.
Yeah. And of course, now we have left the podcast conference, we are feeling energized. We're ready to take on new challenges and also lift each other up and support one another in our various endeavors. So, which leads us to today. And you have a new book coming out. And I thought, well, you're a coach and there's this whole coaching industry that's going around and everyone has a coach. It's a bit like, 20 years ago when everyone had a therapist and everyone still has a therapist.
And you need
now
one.
Everyone else, you do. And now people have coaches. I actually also have a coach, but I think today I want to talk about, do you need a coach as an artist? So we're going to dig into that. And we're also going to do a very special episode where you coach me live.
I'm a tad nervous. I'll be really honest about that.
So am I. This is very vulnerable for me.
Yeah.
Very, very vulnerable for me. But okay, so Heather, tell me about coaching and tell me why it's beneficial.
So the very first thing I'll say is that I resisted the term coach for a long time because my previous example, I've been an entrepreneur for like 25 years, for a really long time. I learned very quickly out of college that while I worked well with people, I didn't work well for people. And so I just did my own thing because for better or for worse, I don't do things I don't want to do. And my experience with coaches up until that point had been very skeevy. I'm like, oh, they're not Stevie, skeevy.
Skeevy. Although, unfortunately, I think we might now find my new nickname.
You are not a skeevy Stevie. It's
no,
not.
I'm not.
We're going to get through this. We're going to get through it. And so I spent months going, what could I call myself that wouldn't be a coach? And my partner's like, what is wrong with you? Just do it. I just felt like it was a slimy industry. It was a slimy group of people. And then I met the man who became my coach and I saw him speak at a conference. Mm-hmm. He spoke for, I don't know, maybe the first 5 minutes. And I happened to be there with my partner and I turned to her and I said, that's my guy. And he was honest and he was authentic and he was generous and kind. And I said, can you help me? And he said, yeah, I can help you. And it changed my perspective. And I decided it. And I have embraced this with so many words and phrases, and you actually got to experience this a little bit in my session at She Podcast, I decided that I was going to reframe what that word meant, and I could make it mean what I wanted it to mean. And a coach for me is a mentor, a leader, and an accountability person. And hopefully there's some level of inspiration, but there's not necessarily this huge, I'm not better than anybody else. I'm in the trenches with you. Like, we're all growing together. We are doing these things together. And it's all a bit of a trial and error process. And as a coach, I really do client-led work, right? So come in with what you need to come in with, and we'll start from there. I don't, there's not a format. Enter at X, enter at A, exit at Z. Like, we don't do any of that. But I've reframed the word coach. I've reframed the word brave. Which I am a big fan of, and I really like the word fuck. So, yeah.
Indeed, great word. Happy to use that word. And going back to She Podcast and the speaker event that you and Lee Shea McDonough led, it was a very interesting, and you almost, like, there was a structure for it, but I think naturally the group kind of took it in a different direction.
Which is what we wanted. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was very vulnerable. There was a lot of vulnerability within that room. There were people who, I think, I maybe the word that was coming up for me was imposter syndrome. I think people were going, okay, well, I have a podcast. I know how to do it. Technically, I know how to market it, or maybe, I don't. Maybe I've got it sponsored, whatever. But, like, how do I really bring myself to it fully? And Absolutely. How do I be vulnerable within it enough to say, how can I make this successful? I'm putting my all into this. What if I fail?
Yeah.
Like, how do I do that? And it was just a really interesting session where people were asking some really tough questions of you and of themselves. And I was and it almost became a live coaching session, which is why I thought this would be quite an interesting idea for us today.
Yeah, it was fascinating. So Lee and I we are all alike. We are all different. We're similar in a lot of ways. And I think we complemented each other well. We knew we wanted to come in and sort of talk about buzzwords, which are very popular in the coaching world, mindset and do the work and show up and empowerment and like all of these things. And the goal really was to reclaim them. And fascinatingly enough, and like I said, I've reclaimed the word coach and put it on my terms. I've reclaimed the word brave, redefined that, just like the queer community has reclaimed the word queer. It's a very, like, you don't have to take other people's things into account. You can change it. You can own it in the way that you want to own it, because those words are good words. Mindset is a great word. Empowerment is a great word. Where they get icky is when you judge yourself or you feel shamed by them, or when you're doing them because you're trying to please other people. And empowerment for me is a really big word, because you hear in the coaching industry and in the self-care women industry, which is really popular, I empower you. And I call total bullshit on that, because empowerment is inside work. No one can empower you, Stevie. You're the only one that does that. And you do it when you show up for yourself in whatever way you've decided you want to show up for yourself. And I believe that when we redefine bravery and we choose bravely, even in the very small, minute things, like having this conversation with me publicly, which I know you're a bit nervous about, it's incredibly brave for you. It may not be brave for somebody else, but it gets to be brave for you. And so I think it's really important to not just buy what everybody's selling, but investigate it.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying about, I think there was an article, I think, that Lee Shea McDonough referenced recently, which was The Guardian. It was about a Guardian article about the coaching industry, and essentially sort of calling it a bit of a charlatan exercise.
Yeah.
A lot of people, you don't necessarily need to be qualified. It's a self-regulated industry and so on and so forth. And there are a lot of people who, and you've got to weed out some of those people. And to your point, I think I empower you and all of this sort of, I'm not woo-woo. I'm not. I support people who are, but it's not who I am. I am not woo-woo. I will not go and take my crystals and sit under the moon and charge them. I'm not that kind of person. There are people that will do that. I'm not criticizing anyone who does that. It's just not my thing. And you may find a coach who does that, and that's your thing, and you go for that and whatever. But I think that it's just not mine. And I'm not saying those are. I've really gotten onto it. I've put my foot in my mouth here. This is not what I was trying to say.
I think you're fine. It's we get it.
I think there are some people who are not as authentic and aim towards those people who are looking for that kind of quick fix, and I will empower you, and here's, whatever, without necessarily having that authenticity. And within, I think when you are looking for somebody to hold you accountable, to help you achieve your goals, and this is really, what is coaching really all about? And if you apply the sports metaphor, because obviously people all apply sports metaphors, and I don't fucking know anything about sports.
Ted Lasso is the extent of my sports knowledge.
Let's use that. When we're talking about Ted Lasso, he's a coach, and he's like, okay, we can work on your technical skills, but it's really about a mindset.
Yeah, that's right.
And how will we get you to that mindset that is going to help you achieve the success that you are looking for? What are the goals that you want to achieve? What are the tactics that you need to put in place? What are the strategies that you need to put in place? And how are we going to get you there? And to me, it's just having somebody who can hold you to account better than you can do yourself.
And to help you process in a way that you wouldn't on your own, to ask. I mean, I am the best at my job when I ask good questions and listen thoughtfully to the answers, and help people figure out for themselves. Like a strategist, which is not a coach, says, go do these things to get this result. A good coach never tells you exactly what to do. A good coach asks a lot of questions so that you buy in to what you want to create and do for yourself. Because as humans, that's the only way we really internalize it, is if we've realized for ourselves, oh, that fear isn't so big, or, oh, I can make a living as an artist. I can do these things that are hard. I can, some people hustle a second nature, and some people, the research and the pitch and all of that is really hard. I can, not me per se, but I can write music, I can sing, I can be on stage, but getting myself to the stage, finding the stage to be on, that's not my thing. And that may or may not be true, but there are lots of different ways to create the life that you want. And my work really is in helping people build a life that they love on their own terms. And if they want to have a business, whether they're a creative or an artist or not, it fits their life, instead of having a job or a career or a business and then bending yourself over backwards to accommodate it.
And as you know, I have recently quit a 14-year career in finance to
very
pursue.
Brave.
Yes, well, let's tell my mother that. No,
we don't really care.
No, we don't really care. Okay. I have not. Yeah, no,
Great.
We don't. But I have done that because I want to pursue a creative career. Like, I am not cut out for that. I don't think I ever really was. I kind of got stuck in I graduated in 2007, got stuck in a 2008 job, credit crisis happened, and then I was buggered. I have wondered.
We never talked about that. Like, how in the world, you are so intuitive and so deeply empathic, which I'm not sure that folks would get from you at first glance, but I spent a significant amount of time in a very condensed time frame with you, and you feel things very deeply. And those are not the kinds of things that we tend to think of in the financial industry.
No, they are not known for those traits. Let's put it that way. But yeah, it was one of those where I needed a job, and the credit crisis happened. I got a little bit stuck into an industry. I had a law degree. It was interesting. I had a law degree, and friends of mine. And you
still have that law degree. It hasn't been removed.
I haven't lost it. It's still there. So I graduated with the law degree, but I didn't go on to do my tutorship. I've even forgotten what the bloody word is, tutelage or whatever it is. I didn't want to practice law. No. I decided, I think Legally Blonde did me a disservice. I think I saw that in high school and thought, this is a great idea.
Like, it's hard?
like it's hard getting into Harvard. That was my plan. And then it happened, and I realized, the bulk of law is going to be conveyancing. So like, real estate law or divorce law. And I'm like, oh, that's horrible. I don't want to do this. So I thought, okay, well, what can I do? And then I happened to get a job in finance, and it was meant to be something temporary. I also got a job living near my dad, and I hadn't really spent a lot of time with him post my parents' divorce and various personal circumstances there, and thought, okay, this is a good chance to get reconnected to him. And it was in Jersey in the Channel Islands, which is a real finance hub. So I got a job there, and then I wanted to move back to Scotland, and I moved back to Scotland. And I remember I applied for over 30 jobs, and I got one interview.
Wow.
One. And so I took that job, and I moved to Scotland, and I, was working on my music, and I released 2 albums when I was doing that. And so I was working on the creative stuff that I wanted to do on the side. And then I wanted to move to the States. So I needed that job to get me here. And that job no longer serves me. So I was like, okay, it's time to get rid of that. And I've outgrown it. I've outgrown it as a person. And, geez, six years after moving to the States, I'm like, it's time to leave that. It's not going in the direction I want it to. It's not, I've reached the peak of what I can do with it. And not to say that I was wildly successful with it. I wasn't. I think part of the reason was because, one, I wasn't seen as the person that fit a mold for them.
Well, and you had no passion for that. I'm just trying to fix my lighting. Sorry. You can't see me.
There you go. That's a little bit better. I should get you a ring light. Editing. Great. This will be edited out. Sorry. It's all right. And so now, I'm in a position to pursue a career within the podcast space, and what that's going to look like will be, is to be seen, shall we say. But I thought what we could do with today's session is go, okay, well, I'm a creator, and let's use this podcast as the thing that I'm creating. Let's use this as the example of how can I grow and change this podcast to be something that I feel is successful, not necessarily defined by the success of Apple Podcasts and whatever and downloads. How will it be successful for me?
Absolutely. And so I would always start a conversation like that by asking, why did you start in the first place? Why do you want to have this podcast?
I don't know if I've ever talked about this on the podcast. That's a very good question. Thank you so much for asking. I started this podcast as a way of connecting a community. When I moved to New York, the music scene here, it's great and it's vibrant, but at the same time, it's very fast. And there's a lot of venues. There are actually really a handful of venues in New York City that are for original music and, where local artists can get on the bill. And most of those venues, it's very much a sort of festival style format. You play for an hour and then someone else plays for an hour and someone else plays for an hour. And I found it very difficult to meet people that way. I think in other cities, it's more easily, you're more easily able to connect with that community and like, oh, hey, I love the guitar that you played there. I'm actually playing a gig. Would you want to come and play with me? It was much more easier for me, I think, in, elsewhere, not in a city like New York to find that kind of community. And also getting on the bill with various venues. When it's not New York, it's much easier to do that as a local artist. But when people are coming to New York as bigger artists, they tend to bring somebody who's lower down the roster.
Yeah.
So it is harder to kind of, get to those bigger venues in front of those people. And when you're coming to New York and you don't have an audience and you have to build an audience and you don't have any friends here, it's a chicken and egg situation.
Absolutely.
How do you get people to your show? So what we did, I co-founded the New York Artists Collective, which is now transformed into this Next Song's About. We started an artist series. So it was a songwriter series where we would have 3 artists on stage, and they would each bring their audience, and then we would sort of cross-pollinate those audience, and these artists would also connect, vertically and horizontally with the artists and themselves and the audience. And then the podcast became the thing to connect it to all sort of, to pull all of those threads together, where if you were a person who was going to the show and you knew one person who was on that stage, you would then be able to listen to a podcast where the other 2 people were being interviewed, and you could listen to a song of theirs and go, oh, okay, cool. Now I'm slightly invested in this. And, it's hard to get people to part with their money. So it was a way of going, oh, okay, this is the show that's coming up. And here's a person that you don't know, but you will know.
Yeah.
So that was what the podcast started out to be. It was sort of a way to promote the live event series that we had. And for me, it actually surprised me because it became such a great tool for me as an artist. Like, I was having these really deep, intimate conversations with people about their music and creating a community of people who were into the podcast, who were into the artist and who were also sort of trying to develop themselves and, listening to these tips and tools. And now it's, then COVID happened. artists weren't able to perform as often, if at all.
At least not live. Yeah.
At least not live or live and in person. So, the podcast had to pivot, and we were like, okay. And I thought, how can I help these artists?
Yeah.
And I started interviewing people, and I started doing more how-to episodes, like how to, develop your online audience, how to grow a Patreon, how to, I don't know, how to find a producer that you want to work with, how to do it virtually, all of that kind of stuff. And that's how I pivoted the podcast during that period. I took a break from it, I think, at the end of September last year, because I was burnt out. I was doing these live every Wednesday.
Oh, that's a lot.
It is a lot. It is a lot. And I was having to find people and feature artists, and I was doing live shows with them. Sometimes I was doing individual shows and plus the how-tos, and it was a lot to coordinate, trying to find someone on top of a 60, 50-hour week job.
It's a serious hustle.
It was a hustle. It was. I was tired and I deserved a break. So I gave myself one. And actually it allowed me to take, because I'd been doing the podcast for about a year and a half without a break, maybe longer. And it allowed me to take a step back and go, okay, this is great. It's fun. What do I like about it? How can I make it better? And I relaunched it in March of this year. And I did, I think it was 10 episodes. And I was really unfortunate. I relaunched it in February. I then, 2 weeks later, the firm told me I had to fuck off and leave the country for 4 months. And I was like, what? So I went to Mexico for 4 months, and I did not have very good Wi-Fi. I had a lot of technical troubles, and all of the things that I had just, changed and developed for the podcast to do some of the video stuff, just was not possible. I could barely upload an episode of audio of 50 KB or 50 meg. Oh, I don't remember. 50 megabytes, I think it was. Megabytes, kilobyte. Fuck, I don't know. I could barely upload an episode of 50 megabytes because I did not have the bandwidth speed. I was having to connect it and hotspot to my phone to publish a podcast episode. So doing anything other than that was just a real struggle. But I managed. I continued, and I did 10 episodes. And then I was moving back to the US. I got married. I quit my job. So I've taken another few months off. And I will be relaunching in December. And this is an episode prior to that. This will air at some point in a couple of months. And if you're listening to this in December, once the podcast is launched, now you know why I took a bit of time off.
I really love, though, the description of all of that and the permission that it gives folks who may be in a similar boat to say, I deserve time off. I can take time off, or this isn't working the way I want it to. I need to restructure it, or this doesn't feel good. Let me sit back for a minute and figure out why. So I have a method. It's actually what the book is about. It's called the BRAVE method. Mm-hmm. And BRAVE is an acronym, and the R is the 3 R's: reassessment, reframe, and resilience. Mm-hmm. And that's the space that I'm hearing that you have been in and maybe continue to be in a little bit until you relaunch in December, which is that reassessment. What do I really want? What's worked? What hasn't worked? What feels good? What doesn't? What are the results that I want? And maybe reframing. This makes me think of what I've always called wins and lessons, and you call the peach in the pit, and that's become a really special thing to me. Mm-hmm. And then resilience and getting up and doing it again. And I just did a podcast interview an hour ago, which half of the audio didn't work for. Anybody in podcasting can appreciate that. I'm like, we got to redo the second half of this interview. But, he talks about how we just we can choose to be 10% happier. We can choose to reassess and reframe and do things on our own term. We can do it right now. We don't have to do it just because somebody else has done things this way. We can change. Mm-hmm. And I love that for you. So now we know why you started this. What, in an ideal scenario, in a perfect world, what would you want this podcast to become? And for lack of a better term, do for you. Obviously, you're doing for others. That's the motivation behind it. But also for you, we have to do for ourselves before we can do for others.
Vulnerability.
Yeah.
What do I want it to do for me? And I think it's fair to say that, my goals with the podcast have changed over the years. I am approaching my 100th episode, which is very exciting. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I think, I've realized that the podcast, I want to niche it down. I want it to be more, I think really it's going to be more of a how-to. And I actually wanted to stay away from that initially because I was like, oh, there's a lot of those. I don't want to do that.
Was it because there was a lot of competition, or because you had imposter syndrome about thinking you could or should be the one teaching people how to?
Both. It can be both.
It can be. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I also didn't want to profess that I am an expert at that. And I don't do that. I think the way that I do it is, here are some cool people. I'm going to introduce you to some cool people who could be your guides if you choose, if these are your people to guide you. That's how I choose to look at it.
And yet you can still be an expert. You can still be a go-to resource should you embrace that. And it may be happening with or without your permission, Stevie. Oh. Consent is an issue, right? Because if people identify this show as a resource, as an artist, to help them learn and grow and try new things or be exposed to things they wouldn't have known about or thought of otherwise, it's your name attached to it.
Yes. And
I hear you wanting to deflect. Oh, but it's not me that's the expert. It's the people I bring on that are the expert. It's not me. It's not me. Don't look at me. Don't look at me. Go look at them. But they're coming because of you. And you don't have to be a different person. You don't have to stop being British.
Yeah.
But there's no shame.
Heather, yeah.
Go ahead.
Heather and I have a joke about I'm a repressed Brit, and if I say I just often say no, thank you, sorry, I'm British, which is the joke. So apologies for interrupting you.
No, it's fine. You don't have to be a different person than you are. No one wants you to be. You are the person that attracts people to this show, and that establishes you as an expert in the industry. I mean, one of the greatest things we can do as an expert in anything is give referrals and give recommendations. I always want to be the go-to person. If somebody needs a coach for anything, ask me first. I probably know them, right? I probably know somebody that I can introduce you to, and I'm a connector. And I think you're a connector, and that's a really wonderful gift.
Yes, I think you're right. I have embraced being a connector. Even at She Podcasts, I was meeting people. In fact, I met a lady called Ming, and I said, hey, you guys, and you're both doing something sort of around the bravery / courage space. I was like, oh, you two need to meet, and you're both in Chicago. Here you go.
Exactly.
And I quite enjoy that because I just, I love creating, and I love to see people getting together and creating something new. So yes, okay, fine. Maybe yes. But I don't know. I struggle with, hey, let's coach somebody to do what I do. I feel icky about that. And I don't need to do that. I don't need to do that.
Yeah. And maybe you don't need to do that, but I don't know. I'm not quite sure I understand why the icky.
Vulnerability. I feel comfortable doing it from a podcast perspective, and that is the field that I'm going into. If you are listening, I'm a podcast producer. That is the field that I'm going into. That is something that I have great passion about. The podcast, about my 2 podcasts. I have a Star Trek podcast also. It's just it's fun, and I get nerdy, and there's lots of sound effects and whatever. I know with that I know about that, and I think, oh, here it is. I think where I don't feel like an expert for this as a music podcast is because I'm saying here are people who have succeeded in music in some way or in the industry in some way, and I don't feel like I have succeeded in the industry in the way that I wanted.
It's that last little bit that's the real trouble, in the way that you wanted. So I'm going to tell us.
Yes. I've now changed. I think I had to take a step back from music because I was just getting really frustrated with the whole thing. Yeah. I didn't, and similarly, I didn't fit many boxes with regard to the industry either. I mean, look at me. I love who I am. I'm very stylish.
You
Thank
can
you very
create
much.
your own box.
I could, but I also, I mean, like, I think I write some very nice songs. I have quite a nice voice, but I don't think I stand out in the way that people need you to stand out, and that's fine. But I think, for me, when where I wanted to get success, it wasn't really happening for me. I was getting a modicum, a modest modicum, if you like, of success, but it was not what I had been looking for. And I needed to take that step back, reassess, reframe.
Resilience.
Thank you.
Get up to it again. Yeah.
Find my resilience and change and move forward.
Yes. And I appreciate that. And I'm hopeful that shift has been more about shifting more into what you want that feels good, instead of, I didn't do this right. I didn't do this the way I wanted to do this, and so I'm not going to do it anymore. And I would like to tell a little story. We get to define what success is. And you said that at the very beginning of this conversation, with this new business and with this podcast, success on your own terms, not Apple's terms, not downloads, not things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I know lots of people who write and perform music who would give a lot to have their own Spotify channel. And it just so happens that I was in the car on Sunday with somebody who said, "Oh, do you want to hear my music?" And I said, "Yeah."
On Sunday. Was it on Sunday?
It was this past Sunday. And and you said, because it was you, for those who are listening and don't already know this, you can just pull it up on Spotify. And I was like, you have a Spotify channel? Like, that's, to me, you didn't crack the big time, and you're not at the Grammys, and you're not a household name. And yet, like, that would feel very successful to me. So everyone gets to decide for themselves. And maybe there's space for you to own that you took that. This reminds me a little bit of the Cameron Esposito keynote at the conference that we were at. Maybe you took that as far as it was going to go, and you learned a lot of things from it. And now you're going to do something different with that information.
Yes. I agree. I have felt quite comfortable taking that step back from music. And don't get me wrong, there are some things that I miss, but I don't, and I miss performing a little bit. I don't necessarily miss writing. And the reason I wanted to step back last year also was because, there was so much happening.
Yeah.
COVID was happening. All of my friends who were full-time musicians were not working. Black Lives Matter happened. And I'm going, people are out of work. People are dying in more ways than one.
Yeah.
What is it that I have to say that I think is so important? And I could not answer that question. And I thought, I don't want to write. What I can do in this moment is to support others. I wanted to support the other artists in that space. And I was very intentional about who I had on the show.
I noticed that when I looked at the catalog. And I appreciated that.
Yeah, but I also want to make that's not, it wasn't a one-off. That's something I do really want to be intentional about going forward. And I was actually sitting down today and looking at who, the guest list that I had, and I'm like, it's not where I need it to be right now.
It's interesting. There's something I find so fascinating about you, and I've only met a couple of other people who have this perspective. And again, there's no judgment. I never approach anything from a place of judgment or shame. It's just fascination. In my opinion, there's nothing wrong with creating for the sake of creating. Mm-hmm. For, I have my old nanny, just German, and she's like, I don't understand why people read fiction. It's not true. Why would you read fiction? It's not true. It doesn't matter. Right. And I'm like, well, I don't know, it's fun. Like, it's a good escape, or I get other ideas. I love fiction. I read a lot of fiction. I also read nonfiction, but I love fiction. And I had a similar reaction just now when you said, what could I add to it? And it's fine that you don't want to. It's not a big deal, because we all get to decide for ourselves. But for anybody listening, like, you may not have the most profound song, but that doesn't take its value away if it's valuable to you. Mm-hmm. And Stevie, you decided that didn't feel valuable to you, and that's within your right to do so. But I think for some people, just the form of creation matters. The self-challenge of, can I do this? matters for the sake of proving to yourself, yes, you can, whether or not there is a tangible result at the end of it.
I have, when I hear yes, you can, I hear Robin Arzone in my head. I love her. She's my Peloton queen. Hashtag Robin's Wolfpack. So I hear what you're saying, and I think there is a lot of self-compassion that you need to have as an artist, that you need to have as a person, and especially when you are creating something. And to go back to Cameron Esposito's keynote, if you weren't actually podcasting, I suspect most of you listening were not. Cameron made a point that not everyone needs a podcast. You can do a podcast to learn something about yourself and move on.
And not actually produce the show, but you can go through the learning process.
Yeah. I did something last year with regard to starting my business that I'm not pushing as a product anymore, but I learned so much from the process of doing it. I am sort of keeping it sort of a product. Oh, I don't want to talk about it.
Why?
I created a how to launch a podcast course. And I'm like, it felt really icky.
That's imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I know, but
I have one too.
How to launch a podcast?
I have a it's very different that I have a company called Podcast Power Academy, where there's podcast training, coaching, social media planning, graphic design. We have a composer in-house, like all sorts of things. I don't really promote it either. But I created it during the pandemic because I was like, people need this. People are creating podcasts, right? It's okay. It's okay that you've done that. You get to take up space in the podcast realm to support people doing their creative endeavors. It doesn't mean that you are the only person that has this skill or this talent. It doesn't mean you're better than anyone or everyone else, but it does mean that people who feel safe with you, who resonate with you, who feel like, I think this person has a similar lived experience to me or can understand me in a way, I want to listen to this person. So you can hold a lane that is really valuable if you allow yourself to.
Okay.
Now Stevie's just saying that so I can move on to a different topic.
No, it's fine. I can sit in discomfort. I had a note about vulnerability that I was referring to earlier and I forgot what it was.
But Brene Brown says that vulnerability is the birthplace of invention. And it's true.
That is 100% true.
So I suppose what I see for you as a growth opportunity is in acknowledging that you don't have to be the very best at all of the things to be valuable in this space, to take up space, and for it to really matter to other people. Not that I think you're only going to help queer people produce, but folks want to go somewhere where they feel like they will be safe and honored and supported. And it's kind of hard to find those people. And you get to be one of those people if you want to be.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It is cool. I fucking love what I do.
Yeah.
This podcast has brought me so much joy over the years. It's brought me some best friends, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I am so grateful for it. Like my co-host of my Star Trek podcast, Aki, I think he was my second or third guest ever. And we started talking about Star Trek. We're like, oh, we should do a Star Trek podcast one day. And the pandemic happened, and lo and behold, we had time.
There you go.
People
without kids. The rest of us ran out of time.
That is true. I have 2 dogs. They're work. I found my note on it's the definition of vulnerability. It's risk, uncertainty, and emotional disclosure.
Yeah.
And I'm not feeling uncertain at the moment. I'm certainly feeling emotionally disclosed. I'm feeling emotional disclosure.
Yeah.
Is it not exposure? Emotional exposure, disclosure, whatever?
It is both of those things. Disclosure as in you are declaring, and exposure as in you are exposing, right? It's both of those things. I actually talk a lot about vulnerability in my book, not to, plug it.
Looks pretty.
But completely to plug it. Thank you. I love the cover. vulnerability does not mean turning yourself inside out and spilling your guts. It just means connecting from an actual, true, honest, authentic space with your flaws out in front and your strengths out in front, and not pretending to be something you're not, so that folks can feel connected. Because we can smell bullshit from a mile away. We've all listened to podcasts where like, this person is full of shit. I don't want to listen. This does not feel good. I don't want to listen to this. And you don't want to be that kind of person. I don't want to be that kind of person. But vulnerability is definitely raw, but it also doesn't mean like cutting yourself open and saying, here, everybody look at my insides. So it doesn't have to be that extreme.
Okay. So in terms of coaching, what can someone expect when they have a coaching session, or if they get a coach? Because we've talked about some. I mean, I've had a lot of fun, but it does, in some ways, there's a lot of internal reflection.
A ton. I will say that there are a lot of different coaches and a lot of different fields with a lot of different specialties. Trust your instincts. Do your research, have conversations. I mean, personal referrals are always one of my favorite ways to do that, because usually people will tell you from their own lived experience. I can only really speak about either coaching with me or the coaching experiences that I have had. I personally prefer to work with a coach who deals with me and all of my ish in all of the ways. As a coach, I always say that I will do life coaching without business coaching, but I won't do business coaching without life coaching. And that is because whatever's happening in your life is going to affect your business, and vice versa. These things are woven together. We cannot separate them. And to attempt to do so is just not going to lead to positive results. So we've got to be able to peel back and talk truths. I guess the best tip I would give to anybody, first of all, I am a big fan of coaching. I have several coaches. I believe in coaching. I would not sell something I wouldn't be willing to buy for myself. But don't do it unless you're actually ready to show up. It is a tremendous waste of time and money to sign up for any coaching, either a program or one-on-one or whatever it is that you're called to. If you are not going to fully set aside the time to be completely invested in that because you believe it's going to bring you the results that you want. And you'll know when you're ready. Most people, you have a deep sense of knowing, I cannot get to this next phase on my own. I'm ready for support to help me get there.
Okay.
Did that not answer your question?
It did. It succinctly answered my question. No follow-ups whatsoever. Okay. So I'm wondering considering we are doing a live coaching session, should I feel like I have takeaways?
I would be very curious to hear if you do. Right? I mean, we've really just done a little bit. I have done a little bit of investigation with you and tried to model asking questions. And I do believe that we've seen you go, oh, I don't know. Oh, that's uncomfortable, right? Yeah. Well, if you were to reflect on just the last few minutes, what rises to the top for you?
I'm going to leave in the silence when I edit this episode. Imposter syndrome, about being an expert in this space. Considering my role as the host. How to then position this to further niche down the podcast, as we've discussed, to a more how-to format and becoming comfortable in that. And I have already made the decision, as you know, I have my potential list of guests. In fact, I was doing it this morning, not in preparation for this, and then you can't see it. Even if you zoom in, you can't see that. And all of them are, you know, how to do something, whether it's finding your voice, whether it's working in the industry, learning from your heroes. Those are some working titles that I'm looking at with particular people. And these and they could be with artists, but it is very much a how to do something. If you are an artist and you are an independent artist and you're struggling with your artistry in some way, how can this help you? How can this podcast be your guide?
Stevie, what is possible for you and your audience, and maybe even your guests, if you embraced the idea that you are an expert at bringing the right people into the conversation to help the audience?
Oh, I like that better. That feels good.
That's a skill.
Yeah.
It's a real skill to know this is what I want to bring to the table. This is what I hear the audience looking for. Mm-hmm. I really think this is going to make a difference. Mm-hmm. You can be an expert at that.
True. And I get pitched. I actually had a pitch. Someone reached out today. Maybe it was yesterday. Whatever. And I'm just like, nah, you're not my vibe. And, so you get a lot of, like, as a podcaster, you get a lot of blind pitches. And you get people and you're like, have you listened to my show?
All the time. I get that all the time. I'm like, I'm sorry, real estate investor, this isn't a good fit. Thank you very much.
Do you even podcast, bro? Do we even music, bro? I don't know. So it's one, it would be lovely if people pitched me and I loved their ideas all the time. Once or twice it has happened and I've liked it, but for the most part, I have to pitch people I want to be on the show. It's not easy.
No, but would it feel easier if you were able to get comfortable with the idea that you have this show and that you are the expert at bringing the right people to the table? If you were to say, people come and listen to my show because I bring emergent conversation. Mm-hmm. And I believe that what you as the potential guest can bring to the table would be really impactful, right? It's the thing about confidence. And
what was the word you're searching for there, Heather?
What is the word I'm searching for? I mean, it is mostly confident. I think it's mostly confidence. It's like shutting down that limiting voice, stepping outside of that imposter syndrome, is that people will respond better, quite frankly. Like somebody who goes, oh, I've got this show and I'm hoping that people will listen to it and they'll get some good tips on how to be a professional artist or grow their artistry. And I think you could be great. That's going to land one way versus I bring people together to help artists really take things to the next level. I love your message. I'd love to have you on the show. Now you're a very confident person, but I think in general, but how you present that really matters a lot.
Yeah. And for the most part, when I am pitching, it's via email and I have a very good pitching strategy. I have done my homework. I have picked people that I really do believe will be good for the show. So I've already done that, and I'm already confident that this will be a great episode before I reach out. And I already know, and I can point to, hey, I've had this person on the show.
Yeah.
Here's a name. I'm just going to throw out some names of some awesome people that I've had on from, Grammy-nominated songwriters or winners, in fact, to, industry experts who might not be so well known, but have a lot to offer. So I already know what, like, this is going to be a good person. It's whether, and I think, hey, listen, I have a show of substance. I'm also a really good producer. I'm a good editor. Like, I know that it sounds good. Like, this is not a podcast where you're going to get shit audio. I can promise you that.
There you go.
I know that I have a good product here. So I am confident in that. And it's interesting, having just been to a She Podcasts conference, and it is a women and non-binary, it's inclusive of that identity. And it was interesting hearing a lot of people talk with confidence, but, being like, and I was on a call with someone today who was like, I have a kick, like, I am kick-ass at my business. I'm a badass at this. And I was like, good for you.
Yeah.
And it, and we're so used to hearing, and I say
especially with women. No, it's true.
Women who, will say, I do something well. And we're so used to just being critical and going, oh, that's a bit arrogant, isn't it? And it's not, because
it's not.
But we're just so conditioned to think that it is.
It's not bragging if you can back it up. And
Indeed.
men don't have that problem. In most cases, not all. I will not blanket stereotype, but in general, women are taught to be more humble or to step back. And I'll tell you, I'm a fucking fantastic coach.
You
I
did tell
am.
me that. And I was like, look at you. Good for you.
Yeah.
I remember you said that within the first 5 minutes, I believe you said something like that. I'm like,
I probably didn't just say it out of nowhere, listeners. I mean, I think we were having a conversation. I didn't go, hey, Stevie, I'm Heather. I'm a fucking fantastic coach. Nice to meet you. Right? Mm-hmm. But, imposter syndrome is a really interesting thing. It's a very real thing, but it's super societally conditioned. And my experience tells me that the only way to shut that voice down is to do the work and get the feedback and know that you bring something valuable to the table. So asking your guests, asking your listeners, how did this feel for you? What were your takeaways? What do you love about this? And use that to your advantage. Actually, I have a document that I create and I tell my clients to create called the Truth About You list. So you take all of your limiting voices, and we actually talked about this in the book too. Take all of your limiting voices and write them down. So your limiting voices might be, no one will like it, no one will listen, no one's going to buy it. I can't really do it. I don't have time. My favorite one that comes into my head on a consistent and regular basis is, Heather, you just don't work hard enough. Because I work from home. My phone is my computer, or my computer is a laptop. It's always right there. And I have really strong boundaries. I don't work at night because my brain doesn't function very well. I don't work when I have my kids because I only have them half the time. And I have that privilege to be able to do that. But then when I'm not working, my brain goes, Heather, that thing you didn't finish, that's because you don't work hard enough. And I have to actively work and coach myself to say, that's not true. And if you get it done tomorrow or next week, it's going to be fine. It's okay. But so you take all these limiting voices and then you do a full 180 turnaround. What is the polar opposite of I don't work hard enough? Well, the polar opposite is I do work hard enough. And then you need to seek evidence. How do I know I work hard enough? Well, I have a full client roster. I'm invited on cool shows like this to speak. My book has actually been released. I did this thing. I published it. I pay all my bills. We're remotely healthy. You can find all of these ways to prove that the opposite of the limiting voice is true. And we sort of have to go back and look at that list when we feel icky or less than and say, no, that voice is wrong. She or they or he can just shut up. They don't get to win today because I have proof that that's not true.
Would you share that with me? The, what was it called?
The Truth About You list.
Yes.
It's a format for creating it. Yeah, of course.
If you have if there's a little, then we can share that with our listeners and you can do this as your own homework at home. We like to give our listeners things, or this is something I will do in the future, as in next season. I think that I'm working on a strategy of having a Patreon and there's extras and whatever. And, going forward, in fact, this video will be produced and everyone can see this ahead of time. But going forward, the video episodes will be for members only. So,
ooh, fancy.
And the extra things, and then you can ask the guests things. There'll be lots of fun things. But anyway, this is all just about creating a community and being able to connect with me and each other within this thing. So, Heather, you have your Fuck Fearless coming out soon. When is it out? 2 weeks?
The 28th, next Thursday. Ooh, October 28th. Yeah.
How exciting.
It is really exciting.
I have ordered my copy. It had better be signed. Well, we're figuring out a way to get it signed. You're coming to New York and you're
I am. It's not going to arrive from Amazon signed. I'm sorry to tell you. But fine. I will see you Thanksgiving weekend and it would be my pleasure to sign it for you. I'm excited and nervous for you to read it. I really think you're going to like it, but I also think it might challenge you. But in a good way, I think.
Okay.
I think it'll be a good way. There's hopefully some good laugh out loud moments. It's very real. It's very me. It's me on some paper. I'm an open book. You can get the book on Amazon. You can get it on bookshop.org if you're not an Amazon person, and I support that.
The links will be in the show notes. There is also a link in the comments for the live episode, so you can just click and buy.
Yeah, please do. So buy it if you love it, review it, and maybe tell somebody else about it. Because just like those of you, you're creators, you're artists, some of you maybe are podcasters, I don't know, but we all know that the hustle is real. And it's grassroots, right? If the people who like what we do don't tell us they like it or share it with other people, then we don't grow. And
if you're listening, we expect that you're an artist. We expect that you know the importance of telling people about your art. And if you like something, you should tell other people.
That's right.
Yes. We assume as an artist, if you are an artist listening, that you know the game. And don't forget, the holidays are coming.
Oh, yes.
Holidays.
Make the brave leap.
It's the Coca-Cola advert, isn't it? I don't know. Maybe it was only in the UK. Never mind. I'm sure it was a Coca-Cola advert. Holidays are coming. Maybe it was Toys R Us. I don't remember. Time to wrap this up.
Yes. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
How was this for you? For real?
This was good. I mean, some uncomfortable moments, but that is not unlike any of our conversations.
I think Stevie means that as a compliment.
I do. There is no growth without discomfort.
That's right.
And I'm getting on board with that now. We have thank you, Lindsay Balfour. It was the Coca-Cola advert. Clearly, it must be a UK thing. So what was I saying? No growth without discomfort. Yes, I fully on board with that. We have our little group of desert dogs in honor of Ted Lasso's Diamond Dogs. And it's quite funny. I'm the only one in it who's not a coach. We have a psychotherapist. We have a sex coach. We have yourself.
And Jen's a marketing coach. And I challenge the notion that you are not a coach, because I suspect as a podcast producer, you'll be doing lots of coaching.
True. I would consider myself a podcast coach.
There you go.
So yes. Heather Vickery, all the best with the book. Thank you so much for coming on and getting uncomfortable with me.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a lot of fun. Thanks.
All right. I'll speak to you soon.
Okay. Bye.